Thank you, everybody, for coming today. We're obviously delighted to host Don together with the SACC. I've got a few interesting facts for you. So South Africa has won the Rugby World Cup 4 times, New Zealand 3 times, Australia twice, I think. England's won it once, and France has never won it at all. So the trend, I think, is clear in that we know that the Southern Hemisphere teams are the best. in fact, when England won it in 2003, I think the French president said it's a victory for Europe. And that's how stark it is. So in that context, I'm sure we'll learn a lot from you, Don, because Don was born in Zimbabwe, played for the Stormers in South Africa, and has since played for the Exeter Chiefs. So over to Sharon and Don.
Wonderful to have you all here. I'm Sharon Constanson. I'm chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce. And it's just wonderful to see so many familiar faces, but equally some new faces, and to one of our newer members for hosting us as well. We actually stepped in last week when we were in a crisis moment. So thank you, Strathers, for last week, but also thank you so much for this week. The Chamber is busy. We were just counting the other day as to how many events we've done this year, and we're just short of 100. And you sit there thinking 100 times we've had to be present in one format or another, bring intel to our members, share things that are important. So we do everything from meeting the president to the governor of the Reserve Bank to doing a networking event online where we bring all the international chambers together. So we're going to, the format of this evening, Don is going to teach us stuff we might not have known, or stuff we think is such common sense, why didn't we think of it before ourselves? And I ask you all to take upon yourselves some of the learnings he's going to share with us. Because when you're dealing in a boardroom environment, when you're dealing in teams, it's so easy to come with a good intention and easy to get it wrong. We all know how easy it is to get a committee environment, a decision-making environment wrong. We don't intend it to happen, but we manage to achieve it as humans. So I ask you to take a look at what our South Africans achieved in the rugby, which we'll talk about later. And therefore, the changing room is a place that is where we can learn lessons, because you can be resilient, you can be agile, you can step up to the plate. I was in South Africa for the semi-final and the finals in 2 different parts of the country. It was the most uplifting, amazing experience to have shared with the nation. And if any nation worked hard for its country by winning, South Africa really did achieve it. It was quite an emotional time to be there and see what it did. Actually, South Africa can pull itself together. We can work together. We can strive for a common cause. So if sport can do it, why can't we do it in business and politics and our economy and our black market sector, our communities, and all those places where we can actually make a real difference, which is what the Chamber is all about. We're there about making a difference. And if we can uplift the lives of one South African today, so if you're around, I hope I'll uplift your lives, and all of those who are going to follow up with the recording beyond now, we've achieved our objective today. So you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to somebody far more important than I am, who is in the rugby world, and we will chat a little bit about the World Cup towards the end of it, because the talk is about what happens in the changing room and how we can all learn in business to be better than what we are. So I'd like to hand over to you, Don.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Thursday night. You could get home, so we're going to make this good, no pressure. It's really good to be surrounded by South Africans, especially when you hear "you people" said, and not even thinking about how that comes across. But British people don't necessarily like it. But I love it because it just stands out, and it's a big part of an identity, and it's like. And identity is important, and those are elements we're going to speak about today. So, lessons from the changing room, but with a lens through a leadership lens. So it's really important to understand who is telling you what, because I could be anyone just talking about some random rugby experience. But this was a photo taken of my final day at Exeter Chiefs with my family. This was obviously a very big privilege because I didn't do this kind of thing. There was a lot of work done in terms of the background, in terms of culture. And they hadn't done this for retiring players until someone else said to the coach, "Oh, you should give Don a walk onto the field, standing ovation before a game. And I didn't want this kind of thing done for me because it's put me at the forefront of attention, whereas actually it's about the team running on afterwards, and I'm very aware of this. But why did I do it? Because I thought it was really important for those guys that are running up, the youngsters that are going to play, to see how they can get treated if they put their full commitment to the team and what comes on the other side of it. Because my big focus is on culture. And I think that's an important aspect of culture. It didn't cost the club anything. It's not necessarily something they would have done because it doesn't directly relate to performance, but it's the things that people see and it's the things that they make judgments on. So that was why it's important, not just about me. I have played for England. I will talk about like silent CV. There's so many different things I'll talk about today as to why that was important in terms of this shows me not performing. It shows the character that you have to develop throughout your time, whatever job you're in. Whether you're a leader or a follower, and how that might come around in ways that you never thought would be possible. So this, I never aimed to have this as my final sending off. I was injured, so my wrist was in a cast there, but this is the perfect send off, more than running on and playing like the final minutes would have been. So a bit of background as to what I do now. So I do leadership development. So we work on strategy, culture, all those fun elements that I get to come in and say, this is the perfect picture from my point of view. Now I'm going to help you zoom out and try and just get a bit of perspective. I'm sitting there with Phil Sampson. So it was called Sampson Hall. I bought the business. He had prostate cancer, went into his bones, got bone cancer, and he unfortunately passed away in September. But he had a really rich background in terms of Royal Marines, MOD, Secret Service. He was flown over to America when 9/11 happened, formed JTAC here. So like incredible, rich bit of theory and practice that I've bought. And now I can join my performance and mindset and psychology and everything that's in my background with this really rich vein of military structure, plus that high level practice of implementing the things that we talk about. And that kind of why that's important to say is like, I'm not just another rugby player talking about rugby experiences and change room stuff. I've actually looked, how do we analyze it to real world experience? The stuff we talk about in corporate, how am I incorporating those things so that you can take away and actually have some tangible learns from my talk. So this is one tool that we use. It's called the business overwatch model. I just want to set the scene because you'll see how I tie it in. Stay with me here. It's not going to be just theory, but this is, as leadership, this is how you do an infinite organization. You want to make sure that these three circles are within your environment. So the biggest circle is environment. It's the most important thing to be aware of when you're strategizing, when you're operating, when you're shaping, because if the environment shifts and your strategy doesn't, you will fail. So COVID was a good example of an environment shifting, Brexit, and how the business has changed. So your restaurants that went to takeaways instead of being eaten, they changed their strategy, they changed the way they operated to stay in touch with their environment. The ones that didn't, they failed. So that's an important aspect to like, what are you looking at from a leadership point of view when you're looking at your business? Now, why this is important to show is because culture is the second biggest circle. And it's where you probably don't focus on much because that's emotions, that's behaviors, that's motivation, that's your people, essentially. And we can't really measure that. So I'm going to just let that take over itself. Now, leadership sits right in the middle here, taking strategy that you've made, the direction that's needed for the organization, and it makes sure it shapes the culture. Right? So it's really important to just have a good zoomed out view of that, and sometimes good for getting perspective. Now, we'll go into sport now. How does sport relate to business? Like what we spoke earlier, like how does these lessons from the change room actually have tangible elements in what you're doing in business? So I try to come up with this timeline, and I'm sorry, it is quite small, but I can explain it. So this top one here, that's the sport one, and the bottom one is business. Sport is generally 5 days a week of practice, review, preview, and making sure that you've got all those elements right. And then you perform one day. Yes, there's a lot of pressure, there's lots of people watching. One big mistake leads to big penalties, big turnarounds, you could lose the game. Our business is almost the opposite of that. And where you don't necessarily have good structures or the correct leadership operations in place, you have even less of practice, review, preview, and you're just performing. And that's where you get we're stuck in the weeds, you can't see the wood through the trees, all of those elements where I can say, listen, if we can blend some of this and I didn't put the next slide in. Anyway, I say that leadership sits in the middle here. So we've got to make sure that we're dragging ourselves out of the day-to-day and we're looking at how we're performing at the same time as looking backwards to where we failed, to learn from, to look forward, to see what's coming. So that's that environment aspect that we're being aware of. So military also does this. They just practice, go to battle, perform. Right. So they're very well drilled. They're very good in structure. Business is obviously the opposite. So let's just sometimes take ourselves out and be like, let's be a coach. What does a coach do? They sit in the stands and they watch the team perform. So from a leadership perspective, how much are you watching other people perform to develop them so that you're saying less versus how much are you down on the field actually performing? And that sometimes we don't really realize that because we don't distinguish the two. So my focus is, that saying for me is really powerful because not that one. I mean, yes, that one. But if it is to be, it is up to me. So that is a powerful sentence, shows a responsibility that you've got the power, but it's made up of 2-letter words, all of those. So it's not anything complicated, simple. If it is to be, it is up to me. Where do I look? I can be the one that makes a difference. And it's not a complicated thesaurus word. It's literally just a combination of lots of little things that can make a really big difference and make a powerful sentence. I focus on consistency and discipline. That's where I think leadership sits, is you've got to be consistent when you come in. So an example, imagine I did this talk for you for the next 4 days, and it was the same talk. And the first day I walk in, I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. Like, how are you guys doing? Yeah, it's fine. Oh, great. And then the next time I walk, I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? You're like, what's he going to bring the next day? So we've got to make sure that we are consistent in our day-to-day things for ourselves, because the people that are watching us are watching what we do, not necessarily what we say. So that consistency is really important, and it starts at home. It starts with a discipline, because if you can start that discipline for yourself and you be disciplined, it naturally happens everywhere else. And then people want alignment, they want direction. So if you can bring that into your workplace, into your culture, it really does help. So lead yourself before you lead others. So culture focus. I'll speak a lot about culture and the lessons. We'll get into that. And your silent CV. So silent CV is someone's always watching. Even you are always going to be watching you, so you know. So when we speak about authenticity, what does that actually mean to you? Because if you're doing one thing at home and another thing in the workplace, you know what you're doing at home. Others might not, but that's going to ooze off of you. So a silent CV, for example, is I've just played a rugby game and I'm really tired and we've lost. There's fans standing on the side of the pitch. Please, can you come sign it? Don't feel like it. Maybe not today. They're watching. They're knowing that I've done that. And I've missed the opportunity to perhaps inspire a future rugby player by my interaction. Or pre-game, I'm coming into the changing room and you've got a youngster that's been waiting in the rain, they're shivering. And I could easily say, I'm really focused on my game. This is quite rude. That's not worrying about my silent CV. It's not worried about the future of them. It's not worried about how I interact with them, my culture, what I represent. Because at the end of the day, that rugby badge, the Chiefs one I was wearing, or was the England one, it wasn't about me. It was about who I'm representing and who the outside world sees. So for you guys in your own position, is someone's always watching you, and that you are a role model. So do you understand that? Are you acting accordingly? So it's a privilege. It's not a pressure. It's a privilege. We've got to make sure we keep the right mindset with it. I did put the slide in. So this is now the sports where we try and bring that sport bit in. So if we took performing is operating. So you check that the first slide that I put in terms of where your operating sits, where your shaping sits, and then you've got your review, your preview. So that's, what does that mean? That's your meetings that you're doing, your monthlies, your weeklies, your quarterlies, your strategy meetings. Why are they important? Where you go wrong is not understanding their importance and not making them effective. So we couldn't sit with the coaches and they go, right, guys, we're having a meeting because we always have a meeting. What are we going to talk about? It was more specific. So in the changing room, it was like, we're going to do a leaders meeting, we're going to do a defense meeting, and we're going to do an attack meeting. In that attack meeting, we're going to look at the forwards and the backs, and we're going to make sure that were you doing the right thing at the right time? If you weren't, how can we all learn from them? So they were very intentional meetings. So from a leadership perspective, is how intentional are your meetings? Are they there just because you're supposed to do them? Do you actually understand why you're doing them? Because how does everyone else if you don't? And this kind of, I'm hoping, gives you an overview of why they're important, is because those meetings are dragging you out from the day-to-day performing, from being in the weeds, to be able to see from a different point of view, to be able to see the whole perspective, see the future, see the past, and how are we developing people within that. I'm not sure if anyone's seen this before, but this is Len Kearney's model on team alignment and how we're going to get results. So I put my own interpretation on the right there, but basically it always starts with trust. And I've had people go, oh, trust is fluffy. No one really wants that. And we can break down trust a little bit more if we want to. But if you have trust in an organization, you have no fear of conflict. So that's challenge. It's like, oh, I disagree with what you're saying. Well, why? Let's have a talk about it. If I don't trust you, I'm just like, I don't care what she says or he says. I don't really disagree with it, but I'm not going to challenge them. I'm just going to go with the flow. Once you have that, the commitment comes. So I want to do this. I want to be here. I'm going to work an extra hour because that's going to be good for the team. And then the leader's got to be like, no, our boundaries at 5 o'clock, go home. So where are you putting your boundaries in? Because people are going to do that when they're committed. And if you take advantage of them, that's going to run out. So you've got to be able to find the balance. Taking accountability is, yeah, that's me, my bad, I didn't do it. Or actually, you know what, we're falling short on that. I'm going to be the one that steps forward and does it. And then at the top here is results. Now, the big one for me is about, are those results done because the individual wants them and I feel good because I've achieved them, I don't care about you? Or are those results achieved because, guys, we did this? Like, are you saying as a leader, like, we did this? Are we in this together? Yes, so-and-so was the one that brought that client in, but that's a team effort. And are you recognizing that? Or is, I'm going to keep saying so-and-so's brought that client and says, I brought this on, what have you done? Understand that you're getting the results, but it's ego-driven. So then you're lacking trust. So for me, it always boils down to trust. If you can build the trust, these things will happen naturally. But if you don't have these things happening, don't worry about how you're going to get results. Don't worry about if no one's taking accountability, just worry about trust. And that always falls back into culture. If you've never seen this, you might have seen it in other ways. So that is the organizational alignment and the people within it. Everyone's going their own direction. Oh, no, a really good job as a leader is this. Yes, everyone's aligned. This is good. But it's not that simple. It's more like that. That's a good example of where, as a leader, you should see, we want you to recognize that. We want everyone to go in this direction, but at any single time, you're going to have someone that was your best performer turn around and be your worst performer, or they're going to grow an ego and they're going to try and influence these people at the front chair to just go in a different direction. So as a leader, you've got to be making sure that you understand your people. Who are they? What are they doing? Why are they there? This is a creative person. This is an analytic person. This is an emotional person. If you know those, you know how to motivate them. You know how to inspire them. You know how to keep them going in the same direction. So it's always going to be about alignment. It's always going to be about understanding your people. It's always going to be making sure that you're not treating them same number on the same person, thinking that they're the same thing. You've got to treat them as individuals. But where do we draw the line? What's your bottom line behavior that you're going to accept? So leadership is the bottom line behavior to accept. So yes, everyone's an individual, but in order for you to be an individual here, this is our bottom line. So if I was going into a rugby, so that, for instance, when you go up to England, yes, we all want to be in England and we all get treated differently because we're individuals, but you have to be able to bench press 130 kgs is the minimum bench press. You have to run a mile in 6 minutes 30. If you can't do that, you're not fit enough. You can't be in the team. Once you're in the team, because you achieve those bottom line results, now we can make sure that we get in the best out of you. So it's always about that bottom line behavior that you're accepting, the bottom line expectation. Now remember, if you can set that expectation, everyone knows what to work towards. And if they've got that, it's a lot easier to create alignment because then you've given them direction. You've set the expectation. So if someone wants to be a leader, this is what a leadership entails. This is what it looks like. Do you want it because of the money or do you want it because you want to be there? When you're there, I expect you to perform like this. These are what your roles are. Yes, I do. Okay, cool. Let's go. Now let's work. How can I individualize your program? How can I individualize you? So it's just understanding that everyone's an individual, but it gets tough because there's a lot of effort that goes into it and none of it relates directly to money. And you've got to be able to play that game, and it's an art form. So it's all about the people. It will always be about the people. That image I showed, that business Overwatch model will emphasize that it's got to be about your culture focus, the motivations, the internal versus external motivations. And I'll give you some examples. But here is a picture of the guys that played in an away game and then the guys that weren't playing in the team, but they traveled up to watch the team playing. So it's about the support systems. How much are we all in this together, even if we're not playing? But then in this picture, you have guys that will genuinely support that team and guys that wish they were in the team. So they're a bit angsty, but the point is they're all there. And then we can work on that alignment as we go. Here we have, this is my university team, and that is the Vice Chancellor. And this was an academic institution that was never about rugby, but we created such a good culture of people wanting to be in it. So when they looked at us from the outside, we created such a good vibe that it attracted people in. So how are you doing that in your businesses or in your teams? Then when people see it, it's contagious in the positive way, that people want to be part of it. Because if you're not, you're going to be creating the opposite of that, and that culture, people don't want to be there. So when you can't get the external people wanting to be there, you start to lose the people that are within it, because they recognize, this is a poisonous place to be. England is the same. We had so many different guys coming from so many different clubs. So we had to set the bottom line. Once everyone fits that, then we can start bonding each other. And then this is just an example of us all getting together. There's guys that are playing in the team, and there's guys that aren't in the team, but they have to come out there day after day after day and put their best foot forward for the team. So we talk about that triangle I showed. It's that ego aside. I'm going to do this because it makes you better. Because when I'm in that team, you're going to do it because it makes me better. So how are we assessing those things within the organization? And then family. I think we mustn't underestimate the support systems of the individuals. Are you guys about family or are you not? Are you truly acting on that? If family is on your core values right now and you're not thinking about people's families and how you act when someone has a baby or if their kids are sick, take that off your core values. And that's okay. It's about being real and authentic to what would you go to war for? And if you wouldn't go to war, if someone's child was sick and they needed a day off, would you question, are they really sick? Or, maybe we'll take it a holiday. You go, please, you shouldn't even be here. So you have to really assess, like, your core values have to be core values because they have to be authentic and you can never be questioned on them. And I don't mean in an ego way, but I'm saying, like, if family is a thing, no one ever questions that you actually value that. Because if they do, you will lose half the people in the culture, because when you say stuff like, there's no integrity in what they're saying. And it's really important. So rather have one core value that you epitomize than 10 because you're trying to cover everyone. Because you're going to lose all of those people because they're going to pick up what you're not authentic on. So core values are really important. Now, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation is really important. So I put this as your support systems, but your intrinsic motivator. So these are the wives, the girlfriends of the guys that are playing in the final. So we travel up on a bus. Don't worry about it. I'll pretend it's not happening. Joking, it is. So we travel up on the bus as a team the day before, and we stay in the hotel, and then it's all about the final. They all gather on a Saturday morning, the day of the final, to catch a bus. Now, I don't know if anyone here has had kids, but I mean, that's 6-month-old baby, still in the sling, maybe 3 months old. Like, you've got wives and girlfriends, support systems traveling up for 4 hours plus just in the morning with the baby. We know how that is. To come and watch their husbands, their boyfriends, their friends play, to see them for 10 minutes after a final before the rugby team guys get back on the bus and celebrate the end of season because that's the final. And then they get back on the bus and they go, yes, there's bonding there. But at the end of the day, they did that because they were truly supporting the person that was on the field. So why am I showing this? Because the intrinsic motivators of your people here, it's not the £5,000 bonus that you give them this year. Because if you do that same next year and the year after that, they're going to eventually run out because that's an external motivator. It's short term. The intrinsic one is like, who are you? What's important to you? What's around you that you go to that we can help with there? So that when you come in here, you can fully commit. That's intrinsic motivation. So when you stand up here, like, if your teammates would stand up here, would you know a little bit about their family history and like why is it hard? Why is what they've done a great achievement to just be standing as a lawyer in Shredders, for example? What have they gone through to get you? Do you know that story about your individuals, especially from a lens of leadership? Because that's how you connect with people. That's how you inspire them. Because when it gets to the tough moments, you know exactly what their motivators are, their intrinsic motivators. You know exactly how to get the best out of them. And it's not to take advantage of them. It's because you generally go, your story inspires me, so I'm going to do the best I can to help you. So have you got to focus on that or not? You don't have to have a right answer, a wrong answer. It's just a thought provoke. So we've mentioned about core values. I've mentioned about what's your reason why. And then in terms of team culture and foundations, is if family is part of your team culture, do your family days. They don't cost you an extra bit. Do those little bits of extras that will create the indirect bits of money coming in. Not that it's all about money, but if you don't have money, you can't pay your people. You can't pay your people. There's no point in even having culture. So you have to have the balancing act. So understanding personality types. Now we get into the individuals. So these pictures here, that's different personality types. So you see me standing next to these two guys, and you see me standing in front of the one. That's because the guy I'm standing in front of, he very much needs you to stand in front of him so that he hears what you're saying, because he's more abrasive, louder. That's his go-to, is highly emotional, more aggressive. But if I did that to the guys that I was standing next to, they'd shut down. They wouldn't hear me. You need to stand next to them, deliver in a quieter mode, like, are you listening to me? And that's just, it's all about that body language communication and how they're going to receive it. It's not about what you're saying, it's how are they going to receive it. And so, deeper examples are, what are people going to do under stress and pressure in finals, i.e. if you have tight deadlines, like what's their go-to, and do you know that? So if you've got a person that prefers written communication under pressure and you're verbally communicating an instruction to them, they're very unlikely to know exactly what you need from it, and they're going to interpret it in a way different to what you said. So it's just having that finer detail on, what are your personality types that are important. At a basic level, you can predict at a better success rate than if you didn't know it. Now, because they are personality types, humans are very complicated individuals and they change, but it gives you a better idea than if you didn't do it, trust me. These are just examples. Like, we use that I3 at the front there. There's 7 different, it's actually from South Africa. It's fantastic. So it's got loads of cultural variations. But I think at a level, all of them are good because they give you some platform in which to communicate with someone. Now, if it's boxing people in and you're starting to box people in according to what they say, according to what their profile is supposed to be, check yourself, because people are complicated, right? But it just gives you a good idea of what they're going to be and who to best place. So I'll give you a rugby example. If you had a fly half that you wanted as a coach or as a leader to be more vocal, to be a commander, to be one that makes sure that everyone's in the right place at the right time, and you put someone that's got a personality type that's vocal is at the bottom, but they know their detail, they know their processes, they know their system, and you tell them to be that the way you want him to be, he's going to be working outside of what feeds him energy, what gives him flow, what puts him in his best role. So that's a good example of when you've got people in this workplace, what are their strengths? How do you put them in the best place for them so that they can be the best for the company? Or are you just putting anyone in any role? So we often look at you can have the right person can become the best person, but if you hire the best person, they're not necessarily the right person. Right? So it really does boil down to understanding the individuals and what role you put them in. Because sometimes people really want to try hard, but it just doesn't come naturally to them. And I'll show you a video about it at the end. So why culture is key. So one story, so I put at the top there, bin juice, mattresses, and mixed veg. Now, my first half of my career was very successful in terms of being in the first team, playing lots of games. So I didn't really understand some of the language that was used by the guys that weren't in the 23. So 23 is the team that plays on a day, and anyone outside of that was called non-23. Now, we talk about saboteurs or people that kind of, the person that can be really good for the team, but if they're not treated well, they can become cliquey and kind of direct people in the wrong way. So they start to make a bit of a joke and we say, oh, we're bin juice. So bin juice, obviously the dirty juice you find at the bottom of the bottom of a bin. And if you as a team are not making sure that everyone feels welcomed, everyone feels looked after, everyone feels acknowledged, that stuff starts to seep in. So when I got picked for England to go into the training, we're doing bonding, and I arrived late coming from Exeter. So me and the 6 guys are with us. We join the team groups and we get put into groups with other guys. And I'm quite quiet. I don't know the guys. So we all have to come up with names. And the name that my team comes up with, now I'm trying to make a first impression. Eddie Jones is there and I'm in a group and I'm like, look, they obviously know each other. Let's see what name they come up with. And they go mixed veg and they draw veggies and everything. I was like, that's such a random, that's such a stupid name. Like, why would you like bin juice? I mean, mixed veg, it's not funny, but I was like, I'll go with it because I'm trying to fit in here. And I didn't realize at the time, but obviously now if Eddie Jones, head coach, and he first impression is important, and I'm going in a group and going, yeah, mixed veg, he already has made that judgment. That's the mentality. So that's what you associate with. Now, if I'd known, I would have hopefully been strong enough in my character to say, guys, I'm not doing mixed veg. But I only found out 3 months later that clicked, and I was like, mixed veg, oh my goodness. That was like bin juice, because I knew what bin juice was, I know what mattresses is. So because it was accepted in those other teams, those other guys' cultures and how they go about things, it starts to drip feed even at international level, whereas it didn't even cross my mind. So that then seeped in. That was a learn for me. Then I go to the young squad up to Saracens, and I did some Saracens here. and got the young squad. I'm captain. And on the bus on the way up, we do team names. And the team names it's normally banter, it's a bit of fun, can be quite harsh sometimes, but it's almost like indirect 360-degree feedback where some guys just don't like it, so they put the earphones on and everything like that. But a lot of the names on that bus that day were about mixed veg, mattresses like, bin juice, all that like self-derogatory names to give themselves an excuse to, this is the team we're in, we've been picked in bin juice. So you're already laying this platform of underperforming. We end up getting beaten by the Surrey side. It was also the young side quite well. It's like 40 points. Now I'm captain. I'm quite proud of the fact that I was captain, leading our young guys. These are the future of the club. And we go in afterwards, and now we talk about being able to challenge us in terms of leadership. And I said to them, we lost this game on the bus because everyone here is so used to calling themselves bin juice and thinking they're not good enough that it's accepted. So when you start to lose share, you've played against another team that has just as many youngsters that are just as many points to prove, and they've took 40 points on you, all because you accepted being called bin juice. And so language and mentality within your culture is important. So when your leadership should be stomping that out, because it's like, listen, you're just as important as the 23, but that was obviously a failing or a gap that let that seep in. Right, so I was in the leadership group at the time, and I took that on personally because it's something that I'd be very aware of going forward. It's like, it's really important how you talk about yourselves. So who do you focus on when you think of culture? And it's often the top performers, and you judge everyone else by the top performers. But this photo here, so that was, we won the first time we won. That's me in the background there. This is the year in COVID where we won the double. So we won the English League and the European one. But you'll notice that we've got the guys that didn't play in the game celebrating, because you called the traveling reserves, and I was a traveling reserve for this game. Now, in order for us to get to this point, we'd had to play, and in COVID, because they squashed the games, a Saturday game and a Wednesday game, a Saturday game and a Wednesday game. And I was in the Wednesday game, which is essentially the second team, with a few guys coming back from injury. So we played that for the season. Because we did so well in the week playing against first teams, guys that were a first team that needed to win and beat them, we gave the first team an opportunity to have a 2-week break before the finals, so they were going in fresher. We won the finals, so it was probably the most group cohesive team effort that I've ever been involved in any rugby team. But if you were to look back at the winning photos, the winning celebrations, who gets to sign the jerseys, who gets the accolades for it, it's the guys that played on the day. Now, that's okay because that's what public sees. But if you, in terms of leadership, are only supporting your top performers, if we got asked to do that again the next year, I can promise you we wouldn't have done it as well. Because the guys on the Wednesday would have felt unappreciated. They know what's going to happen on the other end. They'll just be left in the dust. So I learned at university level, it was about making sure that we're good people before we become the best people. So we'd only have really good people. So it would be thanking the lady that's doing the coffees. It would be thanking the person that's sweeping the floors. It would be picking up your rubbish. All those little things that seemingly don't matter, our coach really focused on. And he happens to be the head coach of Stormers now, who are doing extremely well. And they've got a very good culture going. Right, so those lessons about making sure that you're people focused, they do come about and they are really important. And they were some of the biggest lessons I've learned. So through failings and through successes. Now, just to put a little bit more on the saboteurs. So this diagram on the left here, you see the little red dots, and they get more and they get more and more. If you don't deal with the saboteurs early on, they then start to form cliques and they start to get more and more and more. So it's really important from leadership level to be able to understand holistically who your people are, what are they saying, who's on board, who's not, and how we get them aligned more often than not. Who's that arrow at the front that then does a U-turn? And do you recognize them soon enough before they clash into everyone else that's going the other way? And so this can also be seen at different levels. So if you have the senior leadership team and you've got one saboteur, they interact with people below them, then eventually you end up with a culture that's full of the wrong culture that you didn't want. That picture there, so it's funny, he's wrapping himself with cling film because he's lost his head and he's in the physio room and he's just like, I don't really know what to do. So he's trying to make a joke of it. He's putting himself as a center of attention in a negative way. But he'd been at the club for maybe 10 years, stalwart of the club. But in his last year, he wasn't performing, wasn't looked after, wasn't acknowledged, and then started to become someone that would mess around and would just struggle. And it wasn't he really wanted to do well. Everyone has the best intentions, but it's just human nature. It really is. So that's where it does take effort. Now, I did want to touch on this as a second last slide. So measurables. are really important to understand how you implement them and what happens. Now, there's obviously buzzwords of psychological safety that go around. What do those mean? Now, the story of measurables is whatever you want it to be. So whatever you want your numbers to tell you, they will tell you. Right? So that's where you see like people that get overmanaged, the management level, they use these numbers with their people and go, these are your KPIs and you're not performing to them, therefore you're not good enough. It's like, be very careful of what your numbers are doing to that person's motivation to want to do well within your team. Make sure that they're there to develop them, not break them down. Now, I'll give an example is your immeasurables on a rugby field are, what am I saying to the person next to me to make them better at what they do? How am I motivating someone that's about to go into that darkness of, I'm so tired, I can't do this anymore, and I'm just reminding them of something. Like, that's not measured. That's that ability to be able to interact with someone else that then goes and gets a better performance, right? But that doesn't get measured. So if you are only measuring the amount of tackles someone makes and the runs they're doing, that becomes a very structured look on things. You're not worried about the motivations, what else is going on, the bigger picture, the supporting system of what makes those numbers. So now I'm going to simplify it even more, like I don't mean by data and the measurables. So we used to use check, action, highlight. So if I was to do a carry, which is someone passed me the ball and I'm going to carry it into tackle, I would get a check. If it's like, come see me, there's just something I need to talk about. Just, did you see this? What do you think about that? Easy conversation. An action is, it doesn't matter what I did. If I went backwards and I got tackled backwards, if I got tackled forwards, didn't really do that well in terms of making a big impact, it would just be an action. Like, I acknowledge that you tried that, that's fine. And a highlight is, wow, you did really well. There's your highlight. So my thinking, and most of the guys thinking in that data that we used was, I want to highlight. So you're always chasing that positive psychology behind it. Then we change. So for those that are more, he's not talking much about Springboks. Jacques Nienaber, he coached me at Stormers, and he used to use, for your tackles, he used to stat them on tackle or attitude. That was it, those two. If you missed a tackle, you missed a tackle. You can't hide from a missed tackle. There's nothing negative about that. Like, yes, missed tackle, flip, sorry. But if you did an easy tackle, half-hearted tackle, it would just be a tackle. I'm not really worried about that. What I want to see is, I want to see your attitude. So when you'd make a tackle that he likes, there's your attitude. And so you come back, it's like, that's attitude, that's what I want to see. So immediately you're like, oh, now I know what attitude looks like. Now I know what positive looks like. I'm going to keep chasing positives. We changed halfway through my time at Exeter Chiefs to 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 was an error, fine. 1 was a okay carry. 2 was a good carry. 3 was a highlight. So now they've added a negative element in there, just one number, just one assessment number. It then changed myself and other guys around me from going, well, I really want to chase a highlight, to I need to avoid that negative. So I need to get away from that 1. Because what they used to do is they used to add up your total scores. So if you had all 1s, your average would be 1 over 10 Ks. If you had a 1 and a couple of 2s, it'd be a 1.3. If you had a couple of 3s, it'd be really good. And they're right. Our average is going to be 1.5. And yeah, that's fine. Put your numbers on the board. Let's see who looks at what and who's got their 1.5, who hasn't. But a 1 in a tackle situation would be if I'm covering someone else's missed tackle and I've gotten someone who's got momentum and they've made 2 meters, but I've made the tackle. I've covered for someone else. I get a 1 because it's not sending them backwards. Yet it's impossible to send them backwards. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? So, but I'm getting a 1 because it's just an action, and by their stats, it was that guy made ground, I should have done better, because you're not bringing emotion into it. Whereas I'm like, it's not telling the whole picture. So it used to get that a lot, where the psychology or the culture and the psychology around play was, you got guys playing within themselves because they didn't want to be getting those 1s. They didn't want to be making errors. They want to be avoiding them. And when you resist something, it persists. When you think about not getting the 1s, you're going to get the 1s. So when you're putting your measurables out, your data, think about, what are you trying to get someone to avoid it? Are you stressing them too much out of their comfort zone? Or are you actually developing them in a way it's like, oh, you made that mistake, great. That's awesome. How can we develop you through that so that you don't do it again? If they make mistakes, are they coming to you openly saying, Flip, I really messed up? And how are you reacting when they tell you? Because that's the important bit, that right there, they know if they will remember that. Whereas if you go, oh, I can't believe you've done that, next time they're going to be like, I made this mistake, I'm not really sure what to do, don't want to tell them because I'll just get into trouble, so I'll try and cover this up. And then you're starting to create this negative cycle. So it is really, really important that if you're using data and measurables, look into the psychology of how you can develop people so that they're performing on their own and coming to you openly with mistakes and that they're happy to share them. Because if they're not, it's not psychologically safe. People will then be working undertone stress, your health and well-being will drop. And there's so many other elements that you're dealing with or industries are dealing with that are with regards to the people and them not performing that could just be started on that psychological safety element. Because people don't want to be constantly stressed. Stress is good. You can push people short term as long as there's an endpoint to it. But if you're doing that as an everyday practice over years, you are the person who's going to be to blame for people's mental health in your workplace. So it's really, you do have to take it quite seriously and just have a think about it. And the best place to do it, feedback. How are these making you feel? Build those relationships. Just put a little bit of effort in. I know it sounds a bit scary, but it's not. Then the last thing to watch is in any game, most games, watch the last 20 minutes of a losing team. That's a really good reflection of where they're at psychologically. Like, do they free themselves up and play really well in that last 20 minutes because they're losing? They've got nothing left to lose. So they freed those chains of being overcoached and worrying about, this, that, and the next thing. Like, how is this going to come across? And they're like, look, we're going to lose this. I'm not going to lose. I'm just going to play. And then they play really well. And you're like, wow, they played good. That's a good example for me of they've overcome that psychological safety barrier of worrying about what's the coach going to think about this, and they've just been in the moment. I know I haven't thought of a direct example of in your business yet, but if you get me back in a couple of months' time, I might have. So basically, it's give people the freedom to be themselves. You do that by knowing them. You do them by knowing what their best roles are, and you put them in those roles, and you reinforce it when they are. You have to see the best in people for them to see it and for them to bring it into your workplace. So the last video here, this first one is about making sure that you've got. This is having the best person, but they're in the wrong position. So what you're going to see is this number 14 is a wing. He's not a forward. He shouldn't be with the forwards. He needs to put his shoulder on the bum of that prop so that guy at the front can do his job and not worry about anything else. But watch, because he doesn't know that role. So yes, great player, great person. I love him. Let's put him in that role because he's competent. Doesn't work like that. Now watch, this is international level. Watch what he does. So the team guys next. Now watch the prop. Now worried about that. So now he's holding onto his leg. That's very distracting. He also had the 8th man trying to help him there. So like of all of that, he distracted 2 guys around him that could see. And he put the prop into a very vulnerable position because he's holding his leg and he needs that movement, that freedom of movement. And then he's got him here, up here. So it's really important that just because someone's really good in one role doesn't mean they're going to be good in other roles. But he wouldn't have said no, would he have? Because everyone wants to do well for the team. So of course he's going to go there, but he's just going to wing it. And yes, they got the ball back and it worked fine. But it's just a really good example of like, understand your people's competencies and their strengths and make sure that you keep them there. Because when you stretch them out of there, you've got to support the hell out of them to make sure that they are okay with making mistakes and you understand what they're going to do. And then this last one is just a good example of everyone knowing their roles, coming down to pressure, and how they went about it. This was us in the semi-final against Saris. You can see 78 minutes, they are 3 points ahead. And let it play out a bit and I'll just discuss it as it goes. You won't understand why we got a penalty. But now we are well within our own half.
The field position
pretty much ended. We need to get someone to kick all the way to the corner.
The opportunity. Because if they'd stayed,
the kicker steps up, he's got to do his role. He's got to kick.
Defend differently.
He's got to have a big risk there. He's got to go for that corner because that gives us forwards the best opportunity.
Saracens know they can't.
Which he does.
Touch.
That's an unbelievable kick. Under pressure, you have to go over that. Like if you had to do it again, you'd either keep a 2 foul or 2 short. Now you've got the line-out caller having to make sure everyone to know their own role. That's their role, focusing on themselves.
Simmons
to win the game. Yeah, so that is an example of like under stress, under pressure. Everyone there knew their role in the right position. They listen to the caller. But the caller had to make the right position, and then we had to execute. That's a good example of trying to see how that's week practicing the same thing over and over again, making sure we know what Saturday players are going to be with, or line up that will get us over the line.
Great call from the
30 seconds left in the game, that gets us to the
and
time.
Exeter.
That was
Standing
huge.
bar has been
So we wouldn't have
rated.
done that if we hadn't practiced, if we hadn't reviewed. Because at your highest point of pressure and stress, you'll fall onto your highest form of preparation, right? So if you're not prepping in your businesses in terms of your meetings and your those things that need to be happening every single week, so that you can actually zoom out, understand that when it comes to the very big pressure moments and the deadlines, what are you going to fall down to? Where are you failing? And yeah, that brings me to the end of the talk. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you got some value.
One of the things I want to ask you is, I remember back in South Africa, sort of sanctions time of the world, this wasn't a professional sport. This is where people had a day job and where they found time, they did some practicing and then they would go and play. And we weren't really playing for our country because we couldn't. You know, we were banned from international sport at that point in time. Yet rugby is anything but that now.
Yeah.
Any other sport too. But rugby was probably one of the later ones to become commercialized. Can you talk to us about how has that changed the people? How has it changed the sport? How has it changed the professionalism, the money? Because not like football, that's money.
Yeah.
How do we compare rugby?
Yeah, it's very interesting to see if you don't commercialize rugby in the right way, I think we'll lose rugby on a high platform because it is the whole world's moved towards TV rights. You know, the price is going up for the stadiums like it's a business. I mean, we could maybe look at the business model of rugby and see how it could be a lot better. But if they don't adapt, so we've got two different trains of thought. So you've got the old school guard, the old guard in rugby that go, it's all about the core values. It's a gentleman's game. We can't go away from this. Money is bad for it. And I think you can see you will start to lose all the young talent because we live in a fast-paced world. And actually, if you want to do something for fun, it's got to be on your terms and it's very little like, what's what I'm looking for, interference on your day-to-day that brings in money. So if you want to see rugby as a product grow and have the effect that it does have on, like South Africa is the best team that could have won the World Cup for so many different reasons, is you have to look at how you're commercializing, how you're getting onto social media, how you're doing TV rights, and how you're getting into the community parts of the game. Now, I don't know if everyone's aware, but World Rugby at the moment are stopping creators from using content from the World Cup to make videos. Now, that could be said as that old guard, is that very protective, is that holding on to what they've got? Now, a creator can make 14 million views on YouTube. In rugby, there's one that had that many views and got taken down because they didn't own the rights to that video. It's like you're trying to grow the game because you need people to watch. And if people are watching, you're getting TV rights, you're getting money, and you're stopping people from actually trying to grow your game. So it's how are we commercializing the game at the moment? How can we learn from rugby as a business model in terms of your own businesses? And, you know, what are the learns, what are the failures, what are the successes? And then you look at, I mean, the failures and successes, you look at the culture, so that cultural change in it. And you've got a lot more youngsters coming through. You've got more of like the digital creator type environment coming through. How are you playing to that and sticking the old guard or the old culture and trying to adapt it into the future? And that's an example of what we said there in terms of environment moving. The culture's got to move with it. And what bits of your culture are you going to take with it and what bits are you going to adapt? I think unless you take time to review, strategize, identify, I think you would see that the game of rugby will just dwindle and dwindle. Because, I mean, even further into that is you look at video games and the way that they're made on audience sizes. So FIFA, they got so many different types of games out every single year. But the last time a rugby game was made was, I don't know, I can't even tell you, as a good quality. You ask EA Sports who make the game, so why they say the audience isn't big enough. The amount of money they put into developing the game, they wouldn't get back. It's a bad investment. So that's just an interesting way to look at, you know, who's making video games, why, what.
It's the mass. It's the mass, global masses.
Yeah.
The global masses in things like football are just different to rugby.
Yeah.
When I was watching the game, the last three, because those are the ones I watched, the last South African three
Everyone
games.
did, didn't they?
Goodness me, I tell you, I don't think I had much nails left, but they've unfortunately grown since then. The absolute tension in it, but I don't know the rules of rugby well. I've never played the game. And I've watched for years and years, and they say, oh, they're offside. I think, oh, I didn't, what was offside? I missed that one. But I did notice with the guys around us who do know the rules, kept talking about, no, well, you can't do that anymore. And things like fighting on the pitch or trying to hurt somebody or a head contact, I get all of that part for safety. There seem to be a lot of other new rules or different ways of doing things. Is that how the game is evolving? And is that something we in a boardroom or in a business executive team should also be adapting? What's changing and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because it depends on how you look at it. So, I mean, from a leadership lens point of view, you're looking at culture change and how is leadership affecting that change. So leadership's the bottom line of behavior that you accept. There's this law and we're going to adapt it, and people are not liking it. So you think about the head height tackles and the head on head. So there's no black, I mean, it's black or white, isn't it? At the moment, if your head hits someone else's head, there's a penalty coming in, it's going to be a red card. But you look at the final Khaleesi's clash that he had with Sevilla, like there was never malicious in that. It was that legitimately looked fine. Yeah, it's movement. But by the law that they want to implement, that should be a red card. So you see leadership implementing this like blanket statement, there's a red card and that's the bottom line. And you've got a good example of the early adapters. If you look at culture change models, you've got your early adapters like, yes, safety, now my kids can play. And you've got your saboteurs or your laggards at the back going, that law is terrible, it'll never happen, it's going to ruin rugby. And so I would be interested to see how long it's going to take for everyone to stop talking about those law changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good example of the timeline of the human mind and how, as a culture, people adapt to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's essentially what we're witnessing. You've got rugby and leadership in terms of the rules, the referees, all the structures they got in place. And then you've got the inside culture in terms of the rugby players, just adapting to it. And then you've got the external culture of fans and how they perceive it. And then you get to see first-hand feedback through, 360-degree feedback through Twitter. I mean, they are honest because, they don't really care. So it's really, you get to see people being super honest in what they think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fascinating from my point of view. And what we can learn from the boardroom is understand that change isn't easy. And, if you set a bottom line behavior, stick to that.
Consistency.
Yeah, you have to be consistent with it. And people will eventually come over. And if they don't, they're probably not the right people for the change that you want to make.
Yes.
But the caveat to that is make sure that change isn't just a reason for change's sake, but it's actually got something behind it. So when people ask you why, and you explain your why, they're inspired by the why. It makes it a lot easier.
And they can own that why.
Yeah.
But the other important aspect is for people to understand. Going back to that point about change, and you're talking about a pyramid, the psychological safety,
yeah.
And for people to trust. If you're going to go through change, the critical aspect you've got to bring with change is support. You've got to bring in those elements so people can be okay to change. Because they go, it's like, I know you and I have probably both been to the Kango caves, and you've got to post yourself in this underground caves. You've got to literally post yourself blind through the letterbox into something you can't see. I wasn't going to do that. But most people will go do that. I didn't feel psychologically safe to do something I couldn't see what was in the next stage. So if you think of in change environments, if I can't see what you're trying to lead me into, I'm going to stand back and say, no, I'm not going to do it. So we really have to support people to be able to go through change in a boardroom and an executive environment.
So just on that, there's a saying that simplifies what you're trying to say there for me is people don't fear change, they fear losing something that they value.
Yeah.
So unless you can show them that what you're changing to gives them more value, they're not going to want to change.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Sport, we see leaders. And we try and promote leaders in our businesses. We try and educate them. We give them experience. We go them on management education programs. And what we're looking to see is our future CEO, future department leading, subsidiary leading, ultimately CEO or chairman. And I look at Khaleesi. Those who might not know that is the captain of the South African rugby team who won. If I see what leadership training and what he's been given to be the man he is from where he came, I'm sure Mandela must be singing his praises up there in heaven, because he really has done something important. And you talk about having to develop our leaders. Talk a bit about developing Sia.
I mean, there's not many people that I admire. This is not in my personality to admire people, right? but I see how I admire it. Like, I think it's a really good example of you don't have to be the best player on the field. You don't have to be the best in your job to be a leader. In fact, if you are the best, then you're going to be missing out on a lot because you think you can do it better than everyone else. So actually, it's how do you have the ability to unite those around you and inspire them? And that's it. Like, Sia speaks well. He connects to every single one. Like, look at his family background, look at his diversity, and look at his family. Like, you know, he authentically epitomizes who he is and why he is able to bring people around him. Watch video clips of him interacting with opposition after a game or socially on social media or things like that. He is consistently friendly, smiling, sees the best in people. Like he does. I've played with him and had a few camps with him and everything. Like, he has this, like, it's not childlike innocence, but the way he interacts is he does see the best in people. He generally does bring that out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a quality that how do you train that? Not really yet, because I think it takes practice. It's about just a little bit of education. It's you don't know what you don't know. So when we talk about developing leaders and training them, there's a bit of theory, but there's also a bit of alignment. Like, is this really what you want? So when we said about, you don't just put someone in a leadership position because they're the best at their job. It's actually, there's a deeper level to it. It's actually going, do you want that? Is that something that
Is
you
it
want
aligned to the character?
Aligned to your character. Is it your values? Is that something you want? Some people might think that they do, and you give them a chance. But you'd be very surprised when you explain to someone what you expect out of a leader. They often go, do you know what, actually, I'm probably not ready for that. And that's okay, because they might be ready in a year's time, once they've had time to think, once they've had time to change. But then you also get people who go, yeah, I want to do that. And as soon as they've made that internal choice, that intrinsic motivation to be like, I want to be on that, the training becomes 100 times more effective, as opposed to if you're going on this program.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
I worked with a CEO and a board at one point in time. And I said, one of your big problems is you've got a reluctant CEO. This man's uncomfortable. And if you think of his background, he came from a statistical risk analysis background, and now he's a CEO of a business. Those cultures, that human element of what made him want to be that, is not aligned to him being a CEO. Was he relieved when they came back and said, we think you're in the wrong job? He said, oh, thank God. It's killing me. So I get it. But talking about people, we talk about the images of our rugby team, and you see two people almost immediately, maybe a third. You see Sia Khaleesi, you see Faf de Klerk, and then you see the Jorba. Evans, yeah. It's a bit. So, and the one that we will always laugh, remember, take the fun out of, take the mick of, be the character, run around, and you always see him as Faf de Klerk.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of what we see him playing for, wearing his South African flag underwear and things like that. Why do I remember that? Because he does it. That's part of it. His brand.
Yeah.
And is it something that is planned, or is it just it happens?
I haven't played with him, but if I'd equate him to someone that I did play with a lot, was Kobe Jack Noel.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got his own brand, very like tattoos, budgie smugglers, Red Bull, like all of those things go with him. And he doesn't like, I think there'll be some bits that they plan, but on the whole, that's just their character. So I think Faf would consciously make a choice to wear South African budgies. Mm-hmm. And consciously choose to be taken in the photo with just his budgie. But I think he would also wear those at home. Mm-hmm. And that's keep comfortable in them. So, I mean, those underwear that you speak about, or the budgies, I say, it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you look like when you're wearing them. It matters how you feel. If you feel like you look good, people think you look good. If you feel like you look bad, people are going to see that. There's just an energy level that people pick up on. And I like, again, you see someone that is probably shouldn't be wearing that type of swimwear.
And you can see they're looking uncomfortable.
Normally, no, yes. And then normally a dad, and he's got his book, but he's totally comfortable. It's like he actually pulls them off. But you could have someone that has like slim and probably in what you'd think, okay, maybe acceptable. You go, oh, they don't really suit them. It's because inside you know that they don't feel well. So it's like, why I'm pointing that out is that authenticity is really important. Like people can pick up on that whether you like it or not.
You've got to be in who you are at that moment and be comfortable with it. Last question before we get, well, we're not going to do much with the audience. So sorry, we might get one or two questions in quickly. I was in South Africa for those last two games, and everywhere I drove, into almost every province of the country in those 2 weeks. So Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg, up into the Eastern Transvaal, up into the Northern Transvaal. I use old language, so at least you guys know where I was traveling. And everywhere I went, there were green jerseys, from the little guys to the big guys. And it was just such a passion, such an energy, such a pride that the team brought. And I know Sia spoke very directly to that. And how do we as South Africans, as leaders, as business people in our teams, how do we take that kind of pride and create an outcome?
I think if you watch Sia and what he epitomizes, look at who's supporting him too. So like, I know Rassi and Jacques enable him to have that platform. And I think that's really important. So if we equate them to, say, your CEOs or your exec team or your board level, is they are giving the leaders that space because they are very clear on their vision, on their alignment, and what it means to everyone in the team.
And they can trust him.
And they can trust him, and he can trust them. So they know that Sia's got X values in the way he sees things, and they have that same. So there's a connection there. And that gives them the platform to be able to make the effect it does and free them all up to be able to play the way that they play. And they won their last 3 games by 1 point. I mean, you do 1 is fine, 2 is great. For 3rd in a row, that's something else happening that's deeper level. So it's going like at the top level, are you really aligning people to what's now unfortunately kind of had the fluffy stuff, but it's not. It's the most important aspect of that trust triangle that I showed. It's your vision and it's your values because they create alignment. And if people are aligned, they are bought in. If they're not, and you want them to run on numbers, you're going to struggle. I think that's what gets missing because it's not directly bringing money in if we're talking about values and vision.
That slide you had where you went from highlights to 3 and now count the numbers versus the words, that was a profound takeaway for me.
Yeah.
Because you know it, but nobody will listen when you try and explain it. You explained it so well. I shall be using it that way. Because there are many times when people say, no, you need to have metrics, you need to have accountability. Yes, it's the right ones.
In the right way.
It's got to be the right ones because so easily we use numbers to count people and people respond negatively because of the negative bias and the way we are influenced. We just don't respond well to those things. We respond well to positivity, as you describe it all the time. And I see it all the time too. I'm going to have 1 question from the floor. Somebody from Australia's like to ask a question.
Could you talk more about managing, because obviously we as lawyers were often up against deadlines and people chasing us and things happening and developing. And you talked about pressure and how you fall back on your preparation when you're in pressure moments. So be able to talk 30 seconds, 2 minutes on that.
Yeah, as in, so how would...
Well, like what's your, from your experience, what's the kind of, how do we improve in that regard? And what have your learning?
If you're a leader in a leadership position, stop doing so many hours and pull back on the hours and thinking that that's what defines your value in this organization. If you're actually a lawyer not in a leadership position, then it's about working with your leaders to see what are the boundaries, how can we help out, because there's a ability like that you have to assess whether it's too much work for one person and whether that's the right, or if you're the right person to be able to keep up with those deadlines. Because sometimes we will be like that number 14 and take on stuff because we just want to be good at what we do and we want to make sure that we're part of this truth that we've got, this identity, and we won't say no. So your leadership has to have boundaries in place for you to say, no, that's enough. I know what you're capable of. We're going to de-stress you and then we'll push you next month. But if you're in a leadership position, it's how are you pulling yourself out of that to be able to see who else can I get to help me do these things to make it more efficient. So I was speaking off camera earlier about when you're a lawyer and you've got your value is determined by the hours you make, the hours you bill and what bills, how much you bill per hour. And then you get into a leadership position and you actually have to do the opposite of that and do less hours, right? There's a big barrier there because it's like, well, if I'm not doing hours, I'm not valuable to the organization. It's going, no, you need to make the team of 10 that you're in charge of 5% more efficient. If you can make the team of 10 5% more efficient, they can do a lot more than you'd be able to do on your own. And that's a good sign of leadership. But it's really hard to look at your return on investments in that because it's really easy to say I've done 10 hours less. But how do you pick up those little bits and how do you have the faith How do you have the courage to take the risk to be like, actually, I need these 10 people to be more efficient and they can be because I'm going to help them just do that a little bit, or I'm going to put this process in place, or I'm just going to get them to connect and collaborate, and they will get it done in half the time because they both are better than I am. Okay, so that's probably the angle I take. There's no one size fits all answer. It's if I'm helping you individually, I'm helping you to find your own solution, because then I know I've developed you well. If I'm giving you the solution, then I haven't done my job right. So I hope that helps.
I think at this point I see lots of empty glasses. So I'm going to make a suggestion. Gerard, do you just want to come and talk to us about wine for a few moments so that we can go drink something?
Good evening, everybody. Following that, how do I follow a great rugby style to talk about something nice in our glass? Well, roughly around early 1900s, 1906, the Cape government in South Africa asked the most viticultural or most educated viticulturists in South Africa to go and do research work around the world. And he brought back into South Africa about 177 different grape varieties. So if you thinking Sangiovese is an Italian grape variety, or you're thinking Roussanne, French grape variety, or Riesling from Germany, or so many different grape varieties. But and he was there and he planted in his back garden there. And those 4 plants became our unique South African wine grape variety called Pinotage. I don't know if you know Pinotage.
Yes.
Yes, some of you might not know, but that's a South African grape variety. And interesting, I found out the other day that even quite a few high-up wine drinkers in South Africa, they're 50, 60 years old, they didn't even know Pinotage was our own grape variety. So little is the story now. But those grape varieties, that grape variety from South Africa, Pinotage, is now growing in 44 countries around the world. They grow Pinotage in South Africa. Coming back to your point, that guy is my great-grandfather who did that work. So hence I'm standing here drinking off the wine. Coming to this. But in any case, yeah, so that's why I do what I do. Pearl Wine Cellar is here to import and distribute and retail South African wines and spirits. And our job, or my job in that sense, is to be living my culture, bringing those wines in here and showcase to the British public that what South Africa can do. And by doing lots of wine tastings and just living for the people back in South Africa. So I might be here, but I'm a leader, I suppose, in that sort of sense for the industry rather than for myself. And because I live that culture, I think hopefully that will make my business grow to where I want it to go. So buy lots of wine. Thank you very much. Yeah, so now you can come and drink some wine.
One time I was allowed to have a glass.